Okay, so just going into the video now, we wanted to give you more detail about the contempt allegations brought against us. Hopefully when we tell you about the full circumstances of how these allegations came about, you will be as shocked and outraged as we are. As you know, Wick Sheriff Court has brought contempt allegations against me and Ian. And just to clarify, the truth is we have not been charged with contempt as falsely reported by the John O'Groats Journal back in September. The allegations of contempt have been brought under the dismissed civil action between us and Network Rail. Civil courts don't charge people. Sheriff courts acting in their civil jurisdiction are governed by civil rules of procedure, not criminal rules. To get a person to court for a civil action, the court has to formally cite or order you to attend court. It's a totally different process between criminal and civil courts of getting people to court. So the John O'Groats Journal's report that we've been charged with contempt, which was their headline, was false. But no surprises there. Words matter, but newspapers like the John O'Groats Journal play on words to deceive, mislead and manipulate people. Okay, moving on. Hopefully many of you will have seen the last two videos we posted on our channel, where we show two recordings of two hearings that took place in April this year at Wick Sheriff Court in our civil action against Network Rail. These recordings show the sheriff in our case, Sheriff Neil Wilson, lie in court to help Network Rail and ScotRail get access to our land without our agreement or consent, so they could take possession of it. If you haven't watched these videos, please take a look and share them far and wide to expose this sheriff and Network Rail. Doing this not only brings what they're trying to keep hidden to the light, but may encourage people to come forward who have suffered the same or similar experiences as us at the hands of the courts, public bodies and the authorities in Scotland. So the allegations of contempt brought against us relate to these recordings. Now, as I've said, the contempt allegations have been brought under the dismissed civil action between us and Network Rail, using the same process number. So you might be asking yourself at this point, well, how did Sheriff Wilson get hold of the recordings? Well, we'll tell you why now. We'd lodged this evidence against the sheriff with the High Court of Judiciary, the highest criminal court in Scotland, in May this year. But instead of dealing with our petition against the sheriff, the High Court of Judiciary decided to turn it around on us and use the evidence of the sheriff lying in his own court to bring contempt allegations against us. When we got a date for the petition hearing against the sheriff, we then got an email, and I'll emphasise the word email. It wasn't a formal order or a citation. It was an email accusing me and Ian of two instances of contempt in relation to the two recordings that we'd lodged as evidence, in contravention of section 91A of the Contempt of Court Act 1981. And we'll show you some of that email now. setting aside for now the legal question of whether an informal email complies with criminal procedural rules for correct citation and service, we were told in that email by the clerk that our petition hearing had been replaced by a contempt hearing. And we were ordered by the clerk to attend the High Court of Judiciary in Edinburgh in person. And we were also warned that if we failed to attend for the hearing, the bench will issue a warrant for our arrest. So people, if I could ask you to let that sink in. We got sent an email, an informal email by a clerk of the court, accusing us of contempt and ordering us to attend court. And if we didn't, we would be arrested and potentially put in custody. Can you believe that? The High Court of Judiciary were using our petition hearing to piggyback a contempt hearing. They thought it was in the greater public interest to punish us for trying to expose this sheriff's wrongdoing, rather than hearing our petition seeking his prosecution. It's our view that it was nothing short of intimidation by the High Court of Judiciary, who invoked contempt laws to pressure us into withdrawing our petition, which sadly we later did. But how could we go before that bench of 3 judges knowing where their loyalties lay and that they were trying to put us into prison for contempt, for exposing that sheriff's wrongdoing? And it gets worse, guys. Now, just to make it clear, we didn't want to withdraw our petition, but we felt pressured to. And it's our opinion this is exactly what they wanted and why they did it. As soon as we withdrew our petition, we got an email from that same clerk with a document attached purporting to be a court minute issued by that bench of 3 judges. And we'll show you a copy of that minute now. You're not going to believe this, but you'll see from that minute that the bench of 3 judges, that's 3 senior Scottish judges, decided to send our evidence showing that the sheriff lied in court back to that very same sheriff to adjudicate on the question as to whether the recordings constitute contempt. People, can you believe that? Please let that sink in. The highest criminal court in Scotland sent evidence we lodged in good faith with the court that shows a sheriff lying in court back to that very same sheriff to judge whether we were in contempt of court. This situation can be compared to someone going to the police to report a crime and then for the police to accuse the victim of an offence to pressure them into withdrawing their complaint and then handing the victim's evidence to the suspect. Obviously, in such a situation, the victim will be put at risk of retaliation or reprisal from that suspect. Well, that's effectively what happened to us. After that sheriff got our evidence, he then issued an interlocutor, which is a court order, ordaining us to attend Wick Sheriff Court on the 10th of July for a contempt hearing, and warned us that if we failed to attend, the court may issue a warrant for our arrest. And we'll show you that interlocutor now. As you will have seen in that order, It didn't provide any specification of what the nature of the allegations were that were being brought against us. There were no dates, no offence details, no reference to the power under which the contempt allegations were being brought. Nothing. Now, to comply with fair notice, all this information would have been required. And we also questioned how could they use the same process number for the civil action when that action had been dismissed and the final interlocutor issued in May? Well, we were gobsmacked. Seemingly, this is how justice works in Scotland. The courts wield their judicial lump hammer upon two people for daring to demand the investigation into a sitting sheriff who lied in court to influence proceedings to help Network Rail and ScotRail. Public bodies to dispossess us from our land. The court is seeking to punish us for telling the truth. And they're using contempt laws as a cloak to protect the sheriff, and they're abusing procedure to do it. So that same sheriff we caught lying in our civil action was judging us for contempt using the evidence that shows him lying in court against us. This is Scotland, people. Without question, this was a conflict of interest. He was judging in his own cause, which flies in the face of the rule of law and is a despicable abuse of power to try and cover up his wrongdoing. And what's worse, the wider Scottish judiciary is helping him. A judge is required to perform his judicial office with integrity and impartiality, but how on earth can that sheriff have been impartial in such a situation? How could this decision to order us to court for a contempt hearing not have been influenced by bias? Now, we lodged a motion challenging the lawfulness of his actions, arguing that his decision to order us to court for contempt was maliciously motivated. Anyway, we didn't attend that hearing on the 10th of July because if we did, we would be consenting to what we argue would be an unlawful process. And despite the threat by the sheriff in the order, a warrant was not issued for arrest for us failing to attend. Instead, the sheriff recused himself after we lodged our motion. But that didn't change anything because our argument is that there has been an abuse of process and an abuse of power from the start, which renders the whole process unlawful. And the contempt allegations should be dismissed in the interests of justice. The sheriff didn't dismiss the contempt and continued the cause for a procedural hearing for the 24th of July with a different sheriff. We did not attend that one either. So Wick Sheriff Court then changed tactics to try and coerce us into attending for the contempt allegations. So when we didn't attend on the 24th of July, that sheriff continued the matter again to the 2nd of September, which happened to be the same day we were required to answer bail for the criminal case. And now this is what they keep doing to try and get us to attend for that contempt hearing. What we've learned in our experience as party litigants is that the courts and solicitors will manipulate and abuse procedures to try and intimidate and coerce you into doing something or not doing something. They want to control things and they take full advantage of your lack of knowledge about procedural rules. When one plan doesn't work, they will switch tactics, just like in this situation. So the day after we received that interlocutor from Sheriff Wilson, we wrote to the Lord President of the Scottish Judiciary complaining about the actions of him and the bench of 3 judges who sent him our evidence. And we called for the Lord President to intervene. Now, the Lord President is currently Lord Pentland. He's the most senior judge in Scotland. and he's responsible for the discipline of judges and sheriffs. In the most serious of cases, the Lord President is under a statutory duty to refer complaints of misbehaviour by judges or sheriffs to the First Minister to set up an independent tribunal to investigate them for fitness for office. I think we can all agree that a sheriff lying in court to influence the proceedings to help Network Rail dispossess us from our land is extremely serious. It goes to the heart of judicial integrity, impartiality, and the independence from the judiciary, from the state. The bench of 3 judges had evidence in their possession which they had presumably watched. And it shows a sitting sheriff lying in court. But instead of sending this evidence to the Lord President to investigate, the 3 senior judges thought it was appropriate to send it back to the very same sheriff. Shocking, I know. Anyway, Lord Pentland never responded to our letter or any of our follow-up letters. So on the 4th of July this year, we wrote to the First Minister of Scotland, Mr. Sweeney, and the Cabinet Secretary for Transport, Fiona Hislop, calling for an investigation. But to date, 4 months on, we've received no response, which is unacceptable due to the gravity of the situation that we brought to their attention. It's our opinion that this is an institutional cover-up of a sitting sheriff's serious misconduct in office, and the Scottish judiciary and the authorities are doing everything they can to protect him. The Scottish judicial system is abusing contempt laws to shield this sheriff from investigation, and the people of Scotland should be outraged by this. So in ending this video, we make a direct address to the First Minister of Scotland, Mr. Sweeney, and we call the First Minister of Scotland to take action without delay and intervene in this situation. Okay, thank you very much everybody for supporting us, and I ask you to like and subscribe and share this video to get this information out far and wide. Thanks very much, bye bye.